The European Emissions Trading System, the ETS, is the major tool to lower emissions and to combat climate change in Europe. But is it effective? And are the proposed changes to the future system good enough to tackle climate change? This summer, the European Commission proposed a revision of the ETS system for the years 2021 to 2030. The number of allowances, each one giving industry the right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide, is proposed to decrease by 2.2% each year. The majority of the permits, 57%, will be sold in auctions. The rest will be given to companies for free, mainly to industries that risk so-called carbon leakage, which means that they might take their business away from Europe to other regions with less stringent emission standards. The Commission calls the ETS system the flagship of EU climate policy. Environmental NGOs call it not good enough. Anja Kollmuss, ETS expert at Climate Action Network, points at a big surplus in the current ETS system that will be put in a reserve to be used for the future, something that is expected to keep the price low.
It just means that companies don't have to reduce their emissions because they will have these leftover pollution permits they can use from this period.
Right now, a company can buy 1 ton emissions permit for €8.50. Anja Kollmuss thinks that the EU should be much tougher on the industry. There should be no free emissions permits at all, she says. Heavy industries in Europe disagree. Adolfo Aiello at EUROFER, representing the European steel industry, sees the proposed ETS system as a threat to profits and jobs.
We have calculated that this proposal might cost our sector around 34 billion euros in the period 2021-2030. That is a major threat for the competitiveness of the steel industry.
Adolfo Aiello says there is a real risk that steel companies will move out of Europe and that hundreds of thousands of jobs are at risk because of the ETS regulation. But according to Anja Kollmuss, the risk of carbon leakage is overstated. She stresses that research shows there's been no carbon leakage so far, and she also points at the Commission impact assessment, which predicted no cost for industries such as the steel sector.
And you will see even on the very conservative assumption, the steel sector, under the current proposal, will make around 13 billion in windfall profits. So that doesn't sound like they're going to lose their jobs.
At the same time, other parts of the business sector call, as the NGOs, for more stringent emission standards. The Prince of Wales Corporate Leaders Group, a gathering of companies such as EDF Energy, Unilever and Coca-Cola, wrote a letter this week to the European Environment Ministers, who had a first discussion on the proposed ETS on Monday. In the letter, the companies write that they do not believe that the Commission's reform will deliver a carbon price sufficient to maintain the EU ETS as the cornerstone of EU climate policy, nor will it generate sufficient funds to help industry decarbonize. Sandrine Dixson-Declève, director at the Corporate Leaders Group, says that the price of CO2 has to increase in order to be effective. She also argues that carbon leakage has not been proven, and she doesn't really believe that companies will actually leave Europe just because of ETS.
I don't believe that it's just the ETS. I'm sorry. I think there are too many other constraints within our market that are not allowing the manufacturing sector to survive in the way in which it would like. We need to make sure that our system is tight enough so that actually there aren't too many allowances in the system to really give the right signal and increase the price of carbon.
If the ETS, which is the main tool in the EU climate policy, is not reformed properly, Sandrine Dixson-Declève believes that there is a risk that the EU will not reach its overall climate target, which is to reduce emissions by at least 40% by 2030.